What follows is free. But if you want to see the full extent of what we do and get involved, go to patreon.com/word in your ear. Now, on with the show. Okay, well, welcome to another Word in Your Ear. It's very exciting. We're joined by distinguished historian Simon Sebag Montefiore, historian in the past of Stalin, the Romanovs, Russia, all kinds of things. Now, during lockdown, most of you may have taken on some small project, possibly baking or something like that. Simon set the job of writing a book about the world, no less than the world, the history of the world, as seen through the prism of families. I suppose that's fair to say. Simon, is that a fair summary of what you've done?
Yeah. In fact, here's the book, which has just arrived yesterday.
Wow.
Cover. It's quite a large.
Yes, 1,300 pages.
It's 1,200 pages. It's 1,200 pages. But it's only the same size as, the average biography of Churchill or, Kissinger or somebody. So, but it's the whole world. And yes, it's a single narrative of the whole of world history from the caves to, the Ukrainian war that's just started. So, and it's told through families, which I thought is a nice way. The reason why I like families, which this brings us on to music in a way, is that history is usually about sort of battles and things falling and a few economic statistics. And I wanted to find a way to get the sort of grit of life, how people were eating, what they were talking about, what music they were listening to, what theatre, what books, try and get a sense of sort of actual life, how it develops. And so family seems a good way of doing that.
It's really interesting because I wouldn't say, I'm not saying I've read it, but I've dipped into it. It's absolutely fascinating. And I was looking this morning at a bit about how the kind of Elizabethan England, ruled the waves. And they said, well, it was three families from Devon is basically what you said.
That's right. That's the amazing thing. It's often families, and it's often, little groups of families, clusters of families, intermarried. So, the Elizabethan sort of, the Sea Dogs were all related. They were all from sort of small villages in Devon. They were pretty ruthless guys. The Hawkinses, the Raleighs, people like that, Drake. They were pretty ruthless. But that's it. So family's important. And part of that is, of course, music. So all the time I was kind of listening to music. And so I started to think about, I sort of creating a playlist to sort of listen to while I was writing. And that's how this came about. And hence I'm here with you today.
Right. Well, so there's 213 songs, aren't there? Is that right, I think? And some of them have got really obvious historical connections. You've got Universal Soldier and Oliver's Army and Free Nelson Mandela Between the Wars, the room where it happened. But there are some that have, I don't know, I couldn't work out their connection. I guess it was probably a kind of social history connection. Songs like Sunny Afternoon by the Kinks.
Well, that's just about, because that's in there because that's about high taxation.
Right.
Yeah. But there are a few that have crept in. For example, I'm just looking down it. There are a few that have crept in that aren't sort of directly history. Like Oliver's Army, for example, by Elvis Costello. Amazing song. It talks about Churchill, if you remember. And the boys from the Tellers and the Times. Some are really historic, like To France by Mike Oldfield. I don't know if you know that one. I'm sure you do. Where it's all about Mary Queen of Scots.
Right, no, I don't.
But there are some that are sort of, when Rock the Casbah, The Clash. I love The Clash. I'm sure that's just about sort of basically about America bombing Arab countries, which obviously that's historical. But there are a few kind of that have crept in, which are sort of slightly historic, slightly sort of about like Gangster's Paradise, for example, by Coolio, who just died, which I love. It's I think it's got the best lyrics. I think it's one of the greatest lyrics ever written. But that's really about a time in America. But most of them actually have big historical references that are clear, obvious. And what I've added later on is I asked all my Persian Arab friends to give me songs from the Persian, what's happening in Iran today, We've got songs from Ukraine celebrating Turkish drones they're using to kill Russians, and there are the songs of the Iranian Revolution that's happening now, and songs from India. But most of them are pretty obvious, and you probably are favourites. Some of them are favourites of yours, I hope.
Well, look, we've asked you to select a few that are particularly kind of well related to your book. Sympathy for the Devil, the Rolling Stones. Why that?
Well,
yes, you described that as the best history song of all time, which is wonderful.
I described that in the book. I describe. By the way, I should say in the book, of course, music's important, and so it's got sort of everyone from Sinatra. It's got sort of Billie Holiday, Sinatra, the Stones, Bowie, Elton. Mick Jagger. I mean, Elton is a great reader of mine and reads all the books.
Oh, really?
And so, so obviously he had to go in anyway. But also he's very world historical because he's Trump's favourite singer. Something I don't think he'd be very pleased about. Do you?
No.
and Mick Jagger I also know, and he's also reads all my books. So obviously they both had to go in.
I see.
Leonard Cohen's in there too. But just on the sort of, I just made a risky judgment just to provoke you all, which is in the book. It does say, yes, that Sympathy for the Devil is the greatest history song of all time. And I think if you just look at the lyrics of it, it's just, first of all, it's just totally like, I think it's probably one of the greatest lyrics of all time. Please allow me to introduce myself.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I'm a man of wealth and taste.
That's a great opening line.
Yeah, and it's kind of gone into the language, hasn't it? I mean, if you say a man of wealth and taste, you don't need to say where that comes from to anyone who knows about rock lyrics. So, Mick Jagger is a sort of genius just for writing that. And him and Keith Richards are really into history, by the way. They both read everything about history. I've talked to him about it. And because at one point he was gonna make a film of one of my books. So I was very lucky, and I had sort of dinners with him to discuss this thing. Anyway, but then it goes on to talk about all the tragedies of the 20th century, and as you all know, the sort of the theme of the song is that it's the devil singing the song, explaining all the things that the devil has done.
Yeah, he's the architect of all this, isn't he?
He's the architect of all this. So during when the Blitzkrieg raged and the bodies stank, he held a general's rank. I'll tell you who killed the Kennedys. After all, it was you and me. He goes on through history. He kills the Tsar and all his children. And I just think it's not just a brilliant history song, which mentions all the many of the great events of the 20th century, which are all in the book. Every one of those is in the book, obviously. But it's just the sort of the use of irony that he's singing it as the devil. And please allow me to, I bet you guessed my name, but what's troubling you is the nature of my game. And also the tune is amazing. So I just think it's like it's by far the greatest history song of all time. And there are a few rivals, which we're going to talk about as well, because I've named them as well. But I just wondered, do you agree with me, or do you have other candidates?
Oh, well,
I agree that it's one of the best Jagger lyrics. Unbelievably underrated lyrics.
Yeah. I do think it's intriguing how many, you saying it made me think of it, is how many kind of big rock stars are really interested in history. Yes. It's remarkable. Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, Phil Collins, people like that. Yeah. I suppose they just spend a lot of time on the road or whatever. They have a lot of time for reading, probably. As much.
I think it is. I think when you go to the top people in any profession, they're rather brilliant. I mean, the very, 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 very top people. And if you look at all these rock people, I mean, I've met a few of them, as I said, but I never met Bowie, which is one of the great tragedies of my life, or Leonard Cohen, and I haven't met Bob Dylan, who I'd love to meet, of course. By the way, they're all in the song list, all those people, because I mean, Bob Dylan, is the great, one of the great lyricists. Leonard Cohen, amazing lyricist, and I think that. The great songwriters do write about great matters in the world, and that has to include history. That has to include the world. I mean, you too as well. are in, for a lot of songs in here, because that they're interested in the sort of in the way that they're interested in more than just love and sex and a few sort of lines of coke, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. So another song that here from your playlist, everybody knows the story, I suppose. Enola Gay, Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. Go on.
Well, I think Orchestral Manoeuvres, I've got songs here from different eras, but obviously this is an 80s song. Orchestral Manoeuvres, again, very underrated, really, because they've kind of been slightly lost in that sort of Depeche Mode sort of, those kind of slightly synthesizer-y songs from the 80s, haven't they? But actually the songwriting and the singing as well is absolutely amazing. And they've done a whole lot of brilliant history songs. I think Joan of Arc is their other. They've written two songs about it. They're obsessed with Joan of Arc, weirdly, and they've done Joan of Arc and Maid of Orleans, which are both genius songs, I think. But this one, Enola Gay, is of course the story of Enola Gay, the bomb, the first atom bomb that was dropped. I'm afraid it's rather timely again now, isn't it?
It is.
But the tune, I mean, the sort of riff in it, is rather beautiful, isn't it? And amazing.
And it's addressed to the mother of the pilot, isn't that right?
It's addressed to the mother of the pilot,
who was called Enola Gay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think the plane was called Enola Gay. Am I wrong?
The plane was called Enola Gay, but after her, was that right?
Yeah, after the mother. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So, and I just think it's an amazing song, and it defines the world historical pop song. It's like just shows. I mean, there are lots of others. I can't remember exactly which I chose actually in this, so we'll have to see. But I think the dropping of the atom bomb just doesn't get much more significant than that, and the song is just amazing.
It's also the idea of pop music that you can have a thing like that in pop music, and it can be a top 10 hit.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people. The only thing they know about the bomb in Hiroshima is Enola Gay.
Yeah, that's quite a thought, isn't it?
It is really, this kind of knowledge just spreads around via pop music.
Well, one of the reasons why I made this list, the soundtrack to the World Book, which I hope your viewers, by the way, will visit it and write in and suggest.
We'll post it.
Great. And suggest new songs. And actually, if you have any more, because you guys are absolute aficionados, you may think of some that I've missed out. I'd love you to go down it, and if you think of any, please let me add them, because I'll tweet that you've suggested it.
Yeah, no, well
tell us about No More Heroes, because that's another. The Stranglers song was another one on your list. So why have you chosen that?
Yeah, I think No More Heroes is up there with Sympathy of the Devil as well. I think it's close to one of the great history songs, isn't it? Because, it's just got some great lines. I mean, I think the one about, Trotsky, he had he made it. What is it? He had an
ice pick that
made his ears burn.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, surely that is one of the great rock lyrics of all time. You can't do better than that. I mean, again, if you say that to anybody of a certain generation, they immediately know. And the Stranglers, of course, are just geniuses, aren't they? Golden Brown's amazing, and the other things too. But this has got No More Heroes. What happened to all the heroes? And actually, it's the theme. It's one of the themes of my book. Really, is this, that you could play as you read it. It's just, it's all what happened to all the heroes, the Shakespeareos. And then it goes on. It's about Trotsky and all the great sort of people who became heroes in history and then were killed.
Who is the great Elmyra that?
I don't know who that is.
No, I never worked that out.
I wonder if that's just another Zapatista reference, or something from Spain. I haven't worked that out.
No,
actually, and I should have. If I'd done my homework properly, I would have researched that.
No, I have no idea.
You probably find that with rock lyrics, half of the lyrics are just there to get to the rhyme at the end of the. They make stuff up absolutely all the time. Kings and Queens, Ava Max. This was a new one on me.
Yeah, well, this is a good one because you've got to have some modern ones too.
Yeah,
I mean, you're right that most of the great history songs are by these sort of giants of rock, aren't they? You've also got all those Iron Maiden ones, like Alexander the Great and Run for the Hills. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of I was trying to find an AC/DC one, by the way, but
there must be one.
I couldn't. There must be one, but Back in Black turned out to be about Bon Scott, so that the death of their lead singer or whatever he was. But anyway, I couldn't think of.
But King and Queens broadly is about the idea that had there been more queens rather than kings, there might have been less conflict. Is that the idea of the song?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a fantastic. The chorus is fantastic, and actually, when I was writing this book, I wrote it in lockdown, and it was just a nightmare to do. Really, I'd like to be telling you that it was an incredibly pleasurable experience. I mean, you can see all the books in here. Yeah. I don't know if you can see them all.
Yeah, good grief. Yeah. That's like my office.
Yeah, it is a bit like, but it was a sort of nightmare because the pressure of doing this was really quite punishing. And I was on my own. My family were in the country. I was just living in this kind of office for 3 years basically to write this book. And so music really is important then. And unlike a lot of historians and novelists and stuff, I also write novels. But unlike a lot of writers, I love loud music, and I write incredibly loud music because
really,
that's amazing.
It's an energy rush,
So not just instrumental music, because most people are very distracted by lyrics.
I do like. I mean, I have listened to a lot of those things like the Succession, the theme tune from Succession, or the Pianist, or those sort of things, or those kind of very atmospheric sort of power things. But actually, I like things that I can sing along to aloud. People think I'm a complete madman. Obviously, I am a complete madman in many ways. But to even attempt this book, but so Kings and Queens was one of those that I really sing along. And you're right, it's about queens. It's about how queens should have run the world. Now, one of the things that you see all the time in the media is only we had more female leaders and the world would be a better place. Well, first of all, I don't know when you're going to show this podcast, but play this podcast, but the very fact that we've got Liz Truss as Prime Minister at the moment might persuade some people that female leaders weren't always the best thing. and I don't know if she'll even be Prime Minister by the time.
No, absolutely.
You may not be.
But one of the themes of the book, of course, today we have some of these wonderful we have some wonderful female leaders like, the marvelous Minna Saarinen, the Prime Minister of Finland.
Yeah.
But actually, if you look at the world, there are also kind of pretty vicious dictators in Asia who are women. And the theme of the book is really that actually male and female leaders, female leaders are just as cruel or sometimes more cruel and wrong and idiotic than men. And it's just a complete kind of ludicrous modern, kind of feminist myth that they'd be better. They are.
I just flicking through the book. You drop on any page, you think, "Oh my God, was that going on?" Compared to that, whatever's happening right now in Britain is nothing.
That's right. That's right. Well, I mean, one of the things. I mean, first of all, just to be on a sort of serious note, it's quite interesting. I mean, in the 19th century, when Britain was the most powerful country in the world, there were about 7 occasions or 6 occasions when they had three or more prime ministers in very short periods, and governments fell. I mean, at one point in 1834, they didn't have a government. They had the Duke of Wellington, who was literally every member of the cabinet was the Duke of Wellington. There was no one else running the whole British Empire for a couple of weeks. So, actually, it isn't so much the sort of the changing of government, and actually. Places like Belgium didn't have a government for 2 years, I think, or et cetera, et cetera. But it's just the feeling that there's just that there's very low caliber. But anyway, for the women, this book is filled with women, and the whole point of a family history is that you've got family includes women in a way, treating women and children, for that matter, who never appear in any books really of world history. That you're showing women, and so it's got Catherine the Great and Elizabeth I and the Empress Wu, and really fascinating.
But also, Pete, you got the first female novelist, I think, a Japanese woman in 1010.
Lady Murasaki.
And then there's an amazing story about a Moroccan pirate queen
Yeah,
Saida, who captures 6,000 Christian children and sells them as slaves. You just think, this is astonishing.
Well, the one thing that you do get from this book is that trying to analyze the world in a strict racial ideology does not work, and that basically everybody's done terrible things throughout history, and Europeans are no more cruel than the appalling tyrants of Asia, South America, Africa, wherever. So I just try and show how it all fits together. Messy as it is, this is how the world fits together, and it's all in one narrative, which of course is very hard to do. Hell of a challenge, but it actually worked somehow.
Well, look, tell us about the last song of your five, which is a Straub song called "The Hangman and the Papist."
Oh well, this is just a sort of. I just thought I'd throw in this. I'm sure some of you know who the Straubs are.
Oh yes.
They've got their lead singer is called Dave Cousins, and they are. I've just put this in because it's such a pure history song, and it's also just a song that the other ones I chose were all really familiar, and everyone would know all the lyrics off by heart. Even some of your veteran rock and music aficionados might not know this one. They might, on the other hand. But the Straubs were one of, I think, a great English band. They're from the West Country, and they're kind of folk music. They started in the 60s and 70s, and they also sung one famous, very political, very history song, "Part of the Union," which is it's in the playlist, and it's all about it's all about how wonderful it is that the unions are running England, basically.
Yeah. It appeared in the early 70s, didn't it?
Yeah.
It did. Before everyone started to think that this wasn't such a good idea.
Yeah.
But it's got a great chorus, part of the union. You won't get me, I'm part of the union till the day I die. But Hangman the Papist is just an amazing song. And it's very powerful, brilliant tune. Brilliant music. It's got an organ in it, which is very exciting, and it's basically set.
Rick Wakeman playing that organ.
Yeah, it was Rick Wakeman.
Rick Wakeman just joined.
Yeah. Rick Wakeman plays the organ. You're right, and it's just about how hanging a papist, which is a Catholic, of course, a follower of the Pope.
So this must be Elizabeth I era, mustn't it? Reacting to Bloody Mary.
It's set in Elizabeth I era. And not Bloody Mary, obviously. So it's just before Bloody. It's just after Bloody Mary.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's in a village. It's very grim. It's a grim English village, cold and dark. And they're starting to hang a papist, and the hangman discovers as he hangs the papist that it's his own brother, and which leads to a sort of melodramatic climax as he opens the door of the gallows, and the brother hangs, and it's all very grim and folky and very British, and it's just and I think it's one of the great history songs of all time. There it is, and I think everyone should listen to it.
Well, look, those are your five choices. The entire playlist is out there on Spotify, and we'll post the link.
Yeah, it's out there. It's out there. It's called "Soundtrack to the World" by Simon Sebag Montefiore. It's a playlist to accompany the world history.
Yeah, so Simon, we'd be grateful for further nominations. Because I mean, you're right. I mean, rock music is absolutely full of odd little songs about things you didn't even know about at all, that
right.
Just somebody read a book somewhere or visited some battlefield or something. I mean, have you got any Pogue songs on there? I mean, Pogue.
What should I have?
Gosh, Thousands of Sailing. I mean, just all about the diaspora. Yes.
Thousands sailing about the Irish
emigration to America.
To the United States. And I'm sure I'm not an expert on the Pogues, but
going on after this.
where you get into Irish songs and all kinds of things, you know, there's tons of Bob Dylan songs.
Yeah,
I learned tons of Bob Dylan. I learned so much American history from the early records of Bob Dylan.
Yeah,
just unbelievable.
The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll.
All those things are true stories, you know. But anyway, we'll think of other ones which we'll send to you.
Coming.
We will.
And Simon would love to hear from other people who've got nominations. And Simon would also love people to buy his book. Hold it up, Simon. There, you've got that. If you can lift that copy, it's a fantastic piece of work. The World by Simon Sebag Montefiore, out now.